Welcome to our Unconscious Bias Awareness Training. This video aims to give an introduction to the concept of unconscious bias, and after watching it you will have an awareness of what unconscious bias is and why we have it, the potential negative consequences of bias, the situations that make bias more likely, and some examples of the different types of unconscious bias.
What is unconscious bias? Our unconscious biases are the mental shortcuts our brains take to help us make decisions quickly and with limited information. Because they're unconscious, we're unaware of them, and that means they're outside of our control. They are automatically triggered, their judgments and assessments of people and situations influenced by our background, cultural environment, and personal experiences.
So why do we have these biases? In a word, evolution. Billions of years ago, many of the decisions we made every day were life and death choices. We needed to be able to make a quick assessment of our surroundings, the situation, and the danger within it.
If you saw a certain creature running towards you and stopped to carefully consider and evaluate whether you should run, before jumping to any conclusions, you could be in trouble. Instinct would make you run. If you spent too long assessing the situation before reacting, you could be breakfast. So bias is an extremely functional and potentially life-saving trick that our brains learn to help us make decisions. These unconscious or implicit biases help us get through the day and make thousands of quick decisions without having to think about them. Our brain is perfectly suited for quickly filtering huge amounts of information, prioritising, categorising, and summarising our surroundings for us, unconsciously. This served us well for millennia, when our unconscious biases saved us from danger. So why is it still useful today? In essence, information overload. It's estimated that 95% of our actions are subconscious, following automatic patterns and conditioning. Some of these are essential, otherwise we may have to decide to breathe, but some of them mean that we end up following ingrained and unhelpful patterns of behaviour. Unconscious biases are automatic mental shortcuts used to process information and make decisions quickly. We don't have to worry about getting eaten too often nowadays, but at any given moment we're bombarded with millions of pieces of information and can only consciously process about 40 of them. Cognitive filters and the rules that people form to help them make judgments and decisions allow the mind to unconsciously prioritise, generalise, and dismiss large volumes of data. These shortcuts can be useful when making decisions, especially where we have limited information, focus, or time, but can sometimes lead us astray and have unintended consequences within the workplace.
Unintended consequences. If these shortcuts or biases are used in the wrong way, or in the wrong situation, they may lead to an inappropriate response. Unconscious bias can prevent individuals from making the most objective decisions, and they won't even realise it. They can cause people to overlook great ideas, undermine individual potential, and create a less than ideal work environment for their colleagues. By starting to understand unconscious bias and working to overcome it at critical moments, individuals can make better decisions, from finding the best talent, no matter what their background, to acknowledging a great idea, no matter who it came from, and build a workforce and workplace that supports and encourages diverse perspectives and contributions. The scientific evidence demonstrating the negative effects of unconscious bias is well documented, but there's still a lot to learn about how to mitigate it. So how do our biases affect our actions? Most of us believe that we are ethical and unbiased. We imagine we're good decision makers, able to objectively size up a person or situation and reach a fair and rational conclusion that's in our, and our organisation's, best interests. But in reality, most of us fall woefully short of this.
Our biases affect us and our decision-making processes in a number of different ways. Our perception, how we see people and perceive reality. Our attitude, how we react towards certain people. Our behaviours, how receptive or friendly we are towards certain people. Our attention, which aspects of a person we pay most attention to. Our listening skills, how much we actively listen to what certain people have to say, our micro-affirmations, how much or how little we comfort and reassure people. Whether we are aware of it or not, each and every one of these things will affect how we interact with people, who we select to interview for a project, how we interview them, who we allocate, and our reasons for allocating them. So we have to do everything we can to stop ourselves falling foul of this trap.
So what percentage of the population have these biases? The answer? We all do. The reality is we all have bias of some sort, created by our conditioning, upbringing and culture. And the whole point is that we don't even realise it, because they're unconscious. Combating unconscious bias is hard, because its influence on our decisions doesn't feel wrong. In fact, it feels intuitively right. But in order to create a workplace that supports and encourages diverse perspectives, talents and ideas, we want to give you the platform and tools to begin unbiasing, to start to mitigate your unconscious bias and encourage you to give your first thoughts a second look. Making the unconscious conscious is critical to creating a welcoming and inclusive workplace for everyone.
These implicit biases cannot be assessed through introspection. You genuinely may not realise they are there. They are often inconsistent with stated beliefs, beliefs you consciously hold and believe you uphold, but in reality you do not, and can be automatically triggered by association, without you having to have a conscious thought about it. Unconscious biases are the stereotypes we form about people without even realising it. Our brains are wired to instinctively categorise people and make assumptions. They can apply to practically anything: gender, age, sexual orientation, race, job, social status, political affiliation, educational status, or even appearance. They are our unintended subconscious people preferences, formed by our socialisation, personal experiences, and even the representation of different groups in the media. This forms a kind of filter through which we judge the people and situations that we encounter. We all tend to place people into categories, often based on visual cues or social background, as it helps our brain to process the vast amount of information that we are presented with in every second. But what happens when we put people in boxes based on what we might assume about them, and what might we miss because of it? This video was created by a Danish TV company to challenge the way the native Danish population think about the new Danes who have come to the country more recently.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
I'm sure you'll agree this sends a powerful message about the judgments we make about each other every day, and how what brings us together may be missed if we make too many assumptions about our differences.
So, is there anything in particular that can make these biases more likely? Well, work by Google has shown there are 4 major factors that make us more prone to the influence of our unconscious bias.
If there are stereotypes around a particular role. So if we're assessing suitability for a role and it has common stereotypes associated with it, our unconscious will immediately bring those stereotypes into play. For example, if we believe the best developers are more likely to be introverted or male, or have worked with certain tech stacks, we might be unconsciously biased against people who don't meet these criteria, and we won't even realise it. When there's a clear minority. When looking at a group, for example a group of potential associates in an assessment centre, if there's a clear minority group, with minority here meaning a group that is outnumbered by others, our brains are more likely to bring up any unconscious bias we have associated with that group. So if the assessment centre had a distinct minority of females, any bias we have in this area is more likely to be triggered. Interestingly, this doesn't happen as often if there isn't a clear minority. It's like the obviousness of the minority heightens our triggers. Whenever we don't have all the information about something, which is pretty much all the time, our brains will work to fill the gaps using our unconscious bias. This can be helpful, but can be especially dangerous if we're missing a lot of critical information, as it could lead the assumptions that we make to be the wrong ones and stop us from investigating more fully. The final trigger for our biases is when we're under pressure. How you perceive a situation can be influenced by how you're feeling. So if you're stressed, rushed, or emotional when making your decisions, it's bound to have an impact. We're always trying to get things done quickly, but when it comes to making important decisions, it pays to slow down. If we rush into something without gathering our thoughts and preparing ourselves, our bias is more likely to kick in and try to help us. So why is it so important to avoid bias? In a word, diversity. Having a diverse team is critical. Diverse teams have been shown to outperform homogeneous ones and are better equipped to tackle complex problems and develop innovative solutions. We are all individuals, but we also act uniquely and more diversely in a diverse group. Our individual differences and similarities help to build our collective strength. To get the most from a diverse team, we need to create an environment where they feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work and expressing themselves fully. And the initial step in that process comes from recruiting a diverse team in the first place. Diversity refers to the variety of differences between people, which can include race, gender, age, sexuality, education, social class, and a host of other things. Worldwide urbanisation, communication, and mobility have increased workplace diversity and will likely continue to do so. Organisations that embrace a diverse workforce and create inclusive systems to support it can reap numerous benefits.
Some of the benefits we see in more diverse workforces include increased adaptability. A team of people from different backgrounds can provide a greater variety of perspectives and solutions to problems. Indeed, research has found that groups of diverse problem solvers can even outperform groups of high ability. Better customer service. Diverse people bring a greater range of skills and abilities, along with empathy from different cultures, which can better meet the needs of customers from around the world. Greater innovation. Organisations with a diverse leadership tend to be more innovative. A Forbes study has identified workforce diversity and inclusion as a key driver of internal innovation and business growth. Easier recruitment and retention. Welcoming candidates regardless of race, gender, age, or background means you can hire from a larger pool of people, and that you are therefore more likely to hire the best people in the job market. So, what types of different biases might we identify?
Conformity bias. Based on a famous study that's been around for decades, conformity bias relates to bias caused by group peer pressure. In the study, a group of people is asked to look at the picture on the left, Exhibit 1, and say which line in Exhibit 2 matches this line. One individual is told to say what they think, while the rest of the group is told to give the wrong answer. We can clearly see that line A of Exhibit 2 matches the line in Exhibit 1, but when the individual who doesn't know this is a test gives the correct answer of line A, only to be informed that the rest of the group has said line B, they often decide to scrap their own opinion in favour of that of the group, a phenomenon that occurs in 75% of cases. Just think how this may play out in a panel talking about a candidate for a promotion. If an individual feels the majority of the group are leaning towards or away from a certain decision, they will tend to go along with what the group thinks, rather than voice their own differing opinion.
Beauty bias is a view that we tend to think the best looking individuals will be the most successful. But this can also play out in terms of other physical attributes a person may have. For example, a study in the US showed that while 60% of CEOs are over 6 feet tall, only 15% of the population are. And while 36% are over 6'2", only 4% of the population are. So this shows some bias in terms of how we perceive a CEO should look.
Affinity bias occurs when we meet someone we feel we have an affinity with. Maybe we have things in common, just feel like we click with them, or perhaps they remind us of someone we know and like. For example, if we were to interview someone we feel we have some affinity with, our micro-affirmations will play out more than they usually would with someone we felt we didn't share an affinity with. For instance, if they tell us they're a little nervous, we may smile at them more and offer more words of encouragement. Whereas if a person we shared no affinity with told us the same thing, we might judge them for it and wouldn't be quite as warm towards them. After the interview, we'd then speak in much higher terms about the first candidate and how much we feel they fit in over and above the second candidate.
The halo effect is when we see one great thing about a person and let the halo glow of that significant thing affect all our other opinions about that person. We are in awe of them due to that one thing. For example, we might look through someone's CV and see they went to a particularly highly regarded college where they received a certain high grade, or be impressed by a colleague who achieved something significant on a client project. Upon seeing that, we tend to see everything else about that person surrounded by the glow of that achievement, even missing areas where they've not been doing quite so well.
The horns effect is when we see one bad thing about a person and let this cloud our opinions about everything else. For example, when interviewing someone, we might be put off by the fact that they went to a particular college, because our unconscious bias has caused us to assume that people from that college are less highly skilled than others. If we assume they're less skilled, everything they say or do for the rest of the interview will be coloured by that judgment.
Naturally, we want to surround ourselves with people we feel are similar to us, and this is where similarity bias shows itself. Maybe we went to the same college, have a similar hobby, or have similar experiences. Maybe we grew up in the same town. We may be more open to hiring certain individuals or giving certain people the best opportunities because we see parts of ourselves in them.
Contrast bias plays out when we are evaluating people against each other. For example, if we have two interviews one after the other, we tend to compare the second interview to the first. Or if we are evaluating people to be given a particular client project or progression, we may compare their performance with others in a similar role. We judge whether or not the person in front of us did as well as a comparative person, when really the only thing we should be comparing are the skills and attributes each individual has to the skills and attributes required for the role.
Attribution bias is about the links we see to success and failure. When we do something well, we tend to think it's down to our own merit and personality. When we do something badly, we tend to believe that our failing is down to external factors, that something else prevented us from doing our best. However, when it comes to other people, we tend to think the opposite. If someone else has done something well, we consider them lucky, and if they've done something badly, we tend to think it's due to their personality or bad behaviour. There's no credit where credit is due.
Confirmation bias plays out when we make an early judgment about another person and then subconsciously look for evidence to back up our own opinions. We do this because we want to believe that we are right and that we've made the right assessment. The danger is that our own judgment can cause us to make a poor decision because it stops us from fully exploring every element.
So to summarise, we all have unconscious bias. It serves a purpose, but when applied in the wrong situation, like some of the examples we've looked at, can have unintended consequences. Certain situations can make bias more likely. So we talked about stereotypes being triggered around certain roles or where there's a clear minority. We also looked at how unconscious bias helps us fill the gaps when we have limited information or feel under pressure. We know there are many different types of bias about many different things, and we've only touched upon some of the most common ones here. But we know that reducing bias is the key to ensuring we have a diverse organisation and all its associated benefits. We hope you found this overview to be both interesting and informative, and look forward to sharing more ideas with you on how we can reduce bias at And Digital.